to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 857 for February 7th, 2021. Coming up in a few minutes.
I wasn't expecting it, so this, especially when you see your face a little bit, the way they've got the label on the bottle, you think, oh, right, okay. But it was nice of them to do it.
Mickey Heads retired last fall after 13 years as distillery manager at Ardbeg and more than 40 years in the Scotch whiskey business. This past week, the distillery released a special bottling to honor Mickey. Ardbeg, with 7 R's, features Mickey on the label, dressed as, of course, a pirate. I'll talk with Mickey later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. And I'll share my tasting notes for Ardbeg in the What I'm Tasting This Week department. We'll also have your voice, Behind the Label, the latest whiskey club of the month, and
Scotch whisky's exports to the United States have fallen 35% since the tariffs were first put into effect. So that's a 500 million or £500 million drop in our exports, and that's really significant.
The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast. Robin Redbreast? You may have seen me around. Face label, label face. Yeah, that's the one. I'm now contractually obligated to be their spokesbird. Yeah, my agent didn't read the small print. Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Hey whiskey fans, I'm Gabriel Cardarella, brand ambassador for the world's most awarded blended Scotch whiskey, Jura's. You could probably guess I've got a lot of stories, but for me, the good ones have one thing in common. They're best told over a glass of whiskey. So hit pause, grab your bottle of Jura's, and let's get back to this episode of WhiskyCast.
Let's get started with the news. Last time around, I reported on the Distilled Spirits Council's annual economic briefing and the impact of tariffs on whiskey makers on both sides of the Atlantic. We now have new perspective from Scotland, where the Scotch Whisky Association has put the discus numbers that show a 35% drop in Scotch whisky exports to the U.S. into perspective. That adds up to lost sales of more than £500 million, $684 million. Scotch Whisky Association CEO Karen Betts says the situation is becoming unsustainable for her members, especially when they're being used as pawns in a larger dispute between the U.S. and Europe over aircraft subsidies.
The situation is pretty serious, I think, and I think it is unsustainable. That's what we have been saying in the press in the UK in the last couple of weeks. We look at export figures, which we get from our UK tax authorities, and Scotch whisky's exports to the United States have fallen 35% since the tariffs were first put into effect. So that's a 500 million or £500 million drop in our exports, and that's really significant for companies. It's hard for small companies who are finding it quite hard now in many instances to get importers to accept their Scotch because they're not sure they'll be able to sell it on. But it's hard for big companies who have had to put in place price rises for their single malts. I think the industry is worried about market share. We have a very competitive relationship with American whiskey, Japanese whiskey, Irish whiskey, which are not impacted by the tariffs, so they don't have that price issue coming in for them. And I think, at the bottom of it all, and I think I can speak for, Discus and the American industry in this as well, I think we're really disappointed that, this aircraft dispute has gone on for 16 years. And that our industry, whether that's, American whiskey from a different trade war point of view, but equally from a trade war not connected to them, or us connected to the aerospace dispute, that governments and the aerospace sector are willing to see this dispute continue while our industry suffers really, really sustained damage. And So, yes, I mean, we really hope that with President Biden coming into the White House, that there may be an opportunity for the new administration to take a fresh look at this and at least restrict the dispute to the aerospace sector and take unrelated products, Scotch whisky, American whisky, out of the firing line.
I know there was some possible olive branches being offered today from Europe in trying to at least solve some of the wine issue. Does that sound encouraging at all to you?
I think that, I mean, the EU has been asking for the suspension of tariffs on unrelated sectors. And I think that is a sensible place to start a set of negotiations to get rid of the underlying trade wars. So, you know, for the EU, for the UK, for the US to be talking in those terms, I think is positive. But we're yet really to understand what it means. We're all waiting for Catherine Tai, the new trade representative, to be confirmed, and then for her to be able to pick up these trade problems with the UK government, with the EU, and see if we can move them forward in a more constructive way, and in a way that, as I say, lets us out from this terrible pressure.
And to put this in perspective, this thing has been going on for 16 years now. You could have matured a pretty good Scotch whiskey in the amount of time this dispute has been going on.
Absolutely. Maybe we should produce a special aerospace edition, a 16-year-old.
Global Scotch whisky export numbers for 2020 should be released by the UK government in the coming days. Karen Betts said the government's monthly data indicates exports could be down by around 20% from 2019. In other news, construction work has resumed on the project to revive the old Rosebank distillery in Falkirk, Scotland. Work stopped last spring because of COVID-19 pandemic health restrictions in Scotland, along with a wall that collapsed at the site. Ian MacLeod Distillers Managing Director Leonard Russell said on the distillery's website this week that they used the downtime to take another look at the plans and wound up going back to Falkirk Council for permission to rework the design. With that permission in hand, work on the foundation for the new distillery building is now getting underway. There is no word on the timeline for completing construction. I've been getting questions from listeners in the U.S. about a new edition of Redbreast Small Batch that is starting to turn up at retailers. The official announcement wasn't planned for a couple of more weeks, but I was able to get some of the details. Last year's debut version had 4 different recipes that went to specific retailers around the U.S. This year's edition, though, will be a single bottling for the entire country. It was matured in a combination of ex-bourbon and Oloroso sherry-seasoned casks for 9 years, then blended and recasked into first-fill Oloroso butts for final maturation. It's bottled at 58.7% ABV and will have a recommended retail price of $100 a bottle. COVID-19 has taken a toll on the hospitality industry worldwide. While other countries have made help available specifically for bar and restaurant owners, the U.S. has done little so far. That may finally be changing. There's bipartisan sponsorship in both houses of Congress to reintroduce the Restaurants Act, which never had a chance last year. The legislation would create a $120 billion fund to help bars, restaurants, and distillery tasting rooms with grants to help cover payroll, mortgage, rent, and other business expenses, along with paid sick leave for employees. Meanwhile, one of the industry's biggest events is being affected again this year. Tales of the Cocktail Foundation executives have decided now to pull the plug on plans for their annual conference in New Orleans this July, given that it's not likely large indoor events will be allowed by that time. Instead, they're planning another virtual Tales conference again this September. Executive Director Caroline Rosen told me this week that future conferences will be a hybrid of in-person and virtual events.
We were so unbelievably excited because we had, close to 10,000 people in 100 countries from around the world tune in. And for us, that just solidified that there are so many people in our community that can't make it, whether it's a COVID year or not, to New Orleans. And it's our responsibility to be able to share that education. So moving forward, you're going to see free and open education via the internet, which is very exciting. And I think it's going to help all of us build a repertoire that can really be something that people can access.
Rosen says there are plans to try and hold small regional gatherings in September if public health restrictions allow. The goal is to return to a traditional Tales with online content in July of next year. On that regional note, Kentucky's New Riff Distilling is putting together a special bottling with a goal of raising $120,000 to help hospitality industry workers in northern Kentucky and the Cincinnati area. The distillery is in the Cincinnati suburb of Newport, Kentucky, and overlooks the Ohio River in downtown Cincinnati. It'll be releasing a rare 15-year-old bottled-in-bond bourbon at $200 a bottle. The proceeds will go to the Ohio Restaurant Employee Relief Fund and the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce for direct grants to bar and restaurant workers. New Riff's Hannah Lowen told me this week the idea came from her team's discussions with the Cincinnati Bourbon Society.
We had both been talking about figuring out a way to really help our friends in the industry. I mean, everyone in the whole world is experiencing this, but we feel very lucky to be in the production part of the industry right now. And luckily, our community is still drinking. They're just drinking at home. And we were like, how are we going to support all of these bars and restaurants and everybody up and down that has been there? And so we were brainstorming, and this kind of light bulb went off in our head of, when we started knocking it around at New Riff, that, a few years ago, we used to have a different product that was distilled in Indiana, and we had kept a few barrels. And our plan was like, well, maybe we'll want them someday. I don't know. We had no exact idea. And this just light bulb went off that they're 15. You can imagine how fantastic they are. Maybe we could leverage those into a big donation to make a big impact.
The whiskey will only be available at the New Riff Distillery shop in order to keep distribution costs down. Single pours will be available at the distillery's in-house bar, the Aquifer. There have been a number of new education programs for aspiring whiskey makers developed in recent years. Now, the Distilled Spirits Council has started its own. The Discus Academy will not focus on actually making whiskey and other spirits, though. Its goal is to provide the business education distillers need in finance, legal compliance, risk management, and other areas. Discus CEO Chris Swanger says the Academy's courses will be available to non-members as well as the group's members.
Building the workforce for the future is very, very imperative for our industry to continue to grow and prosper and contribute back to the economy and our communities and so forth. So we're very, very excited about the Discus Academy, and we think it's something that's going to really be a foundation that's going to benefit the greater industry for many, many years to come.
The Academy will also offer leadership development programs in a collaboration with Cornell University. Finally, Whiskey Magazine announced 4 new inductees into its Hall of Fame this week. Congratulations go out to Fred No of Jim Beam, Andy Watts of Distell in South Africa, Billy Walker of the Glenallachie, and Andrew Symington of Signatory and Edradour. The announcements came as the magazine unveiled its 2021 Icons of Whiskey regional winners. There is a link to the complete lists of winners in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. And that's where you can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long. Tullamore Dew's John Quinn joined us Friday night for the Happy Hour webcast. You can catch the on-demand replay at the WhiskyCast YouTube channel. This week, the one and only Jim McEwen will be my guest. He's one of the living legends of Scotch whiskey, and he'll take your questions during our live webcast. We'll start at 5 p.m. New York time, 2200 GMT, on the WhiskyCast YouTube channel, our Facebook page, Twitter, and Periscope. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events, brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling. McTeers has an auction of rare whiskies this Friday in Glasgow, Scotland. Moonshine University in Louisville, Kentucky has Stave and Thief Society Executive Bourbon Steward courses on February 19th and 22nd. The Taipei Whiskey Club has a Glen Scotia tasting on the 23rd in Taipei, Taiwan. The Whiskey Exchange's Whiskey Show Old and Rare event is going virtual this year. It'll take place February 25th through the 27th. Druitt's has a whiskey auction with online bidding available on the 25th, and Bonham's has its first Edinburgh whiskey auction of the year, March 2nd. The calendar at whiskycast.com has live and virtual events all the way into next year. But remember, all in-person events should still be considered as tentative because public health restrictions can change on short notice. The calendar of events is brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of the Virginia Rye Whiskey. Catoctin Creek co-founder Scott Harris wraps up his annual Art of the Cocktail class this Friday night online, and they'll be releasing this year's edition of Rabble Rouser Rye at the distillery starting Monday. Get all the details at catoctincreekdistilling.com, and please drink responsibly.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Gabriel Cardarella again, the Doers guy. I've seen a lot in my years as a brand ambassador for the world's most awarded blended Scotch. Like the time I got to host a Doers tasting for some members of a major European royal family. Now, I'm not going to say which one, but they did invite me to come stay at their castle. Pretty cool, right? Well, here's another story for you. In 2019, our master blender, Stephanie McLeod, became the first woman to be awarded Master Blender of the Year by the International Whiskey Competition. And a year after that, she won it again. Stephanie's first creation for Dewar's 15 year, is another piece of history. Sweet, floral, with notes of honey and toffee, a perfectly balanced addition to the Dewar's lineup. It's a great introduction to Scotch for beginners, and it's more than complex enough to satisfy whiskey aficionados. So grab some Dewar's 15, call some friends, and make a few stories of your own. That's what a good bottle of whiskey is all about.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by the Distillers Edition collection. Mickey Heads retired last fall after 13 years as Ardbeg's distillery manager and spent his entire 40-plus years in the Scotch whiskey industry without ever having to leave the islands of Islay and Jura for more than a few weeks at a time. This week, Ardbeg honored Mickey's contributions with a special bottling. Ardbeg, with 7 R's, features Mickey on the label dressed as a pirate captain, and it's the first Ardbeg bottling ever that was matured exclusively in rye whiskey casks. I spent some time catching up with Mickey on Zoom the other day. What are you doing in your retirement? We were kind of surprised to see you step down last fall, but I think you've earned it. What have you been doing?
Since that much, I mean, when I finished up beginning of October, so through October I was in a lot about outside. I did a little bit of fishing. The season ended about then for me, so out by the garden, sort of walking the dog, just generally bits and pieces about the house, you know. We're sort of a wee bit restricted in what you can do just now, you know, like everybody else. So it's mainly sort of just local and try to get out every day and, you know, out and about in the fresh air. I like being outside. I've been on the hills a few times as well, just walking the hills. So it's been near the house. So I'm quite lucky. We're 7 miles from Ardbeg here. I'm looking over, you know, Loch and Doll from here, a couple of miles to behind me at the moment, you know, in the hills and forward of me up here. So we're lucky we've got a lot of space, so you can just, you know, if it's just go and enjoy the open spaces. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing at the moment. So nothing planned, just chilling a little bit. So, yeah.
There are worse places to retire.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. When you see a day like this, though, it's been miserable the last couple of days, but I'll make up for it. I think tomorrow and the weekend's looking a bit better. So.
What did you think when they told you they wanted to do a special bottling in your honor, the Ardbeg?
That was really nice. Yeah, I mean, just to do something. It's quite nice to do something. It's a bit. I wasn't expecting it, So just, especially when you see your face a little bit, the way they've got the label on the bottle, you think, oh, right, okay. But it was nice. Yeah, nice of them to do it. Yeah, and it's just out this week, I believe. I don't know where it's. Is it in sale over with you at the minute, or?
Yeah, just arrived in the U.S. The pirate theme for Ardbeg. Did that come as a surprise to you? Did you get any input into that?
I think it was, it was just trying to think about the Ardbeg. It was maybe I don't know whether it was the Ardbeg, he's leaving, or, the pirate theme was quite good. I think we do lots of different themes on it, and it's just something that's a little bit different. So, but yeah, it's nice to see it. And I think the label in the bottle is very, very different. It's quite unique, to be honest, looking at it. It looks really quite smart. So, even although my face is on it.
Did you ever imagine yourself as a pirate before?
Not really. No, I said that at the time. I don't really put myself as a pirate. Maybe as a captain a little bit, maybe, but not as a pirate. But anyway, yeah, it's something different,
One of the things that you really did in 13 years at Ardbeg was bring some personality to the place that it had before, but you brought your own unique personality to the place. Tell me about that and what it was like for you there.
Personally, I just basically tried to be myself, really. I think that's all you can do. When you meet folks, just be yourself and have a chat with them and, meet them and, just do your best for there. I think on the front, I mean, for me, the only thing I ever really wanted to do was do a good job at the place, so enjoyed it, had a bit of a passion about it and enjoyed working there, so that's the way I just tried to do it all the time, just to try to be myself and be, as approachable and, as we can, and just hope that when people came, because there's a good team there, when they come to the place, they can enjoy it and leave with a good impression. That's the important thing.
What prompted you to come over in the first place? I think you were at Jura before, right?
I was at Jura, yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed it there too when I came over, and I didn't expect to come over, when it came up. I thought about it for quite a few weeks, and I'm from Islay as well, and so I was trying to link up, I was happy there where I was as well, and, come back. And I knew a lot of the guys at the distillery as well, I'd grown up with a lot of the boys and I knew them well. So it was quite a hard one, and it was sort of, it took a wee while to go, but, I'm glad I came over, and, I think hope it was a good move for everybody, I hope, so. But I like the place a lot. I mean, I knew Ardbeg from time back in the 90s there, and, I didn't think I'd be back running it or managing it, so I think it was quite an honour to do that. So I've been lucky in a way of people have given me a chance, and hopefully it's rewarded them, so.
Let's talk about that period during the 90s, because that was some of the darker days of Ardbeg when the place was closing down essentially under previous ownership. What was it like back then?
It was sort of quieter. I mean, it was different when you're looking at that time. We didn't have the interest in single malt that we have now. I mean, that was maybe starting to grow then, just at that stage, where it was a different time, within the business. It was still by far the vast majority of whiskey, even from Islay, was in a blended front. So in the single malt style taking off through there, and Glenmorangie taking over and investing a lot of money in it was to see what it is now, so it was quite a different place to see, and you can see where it's come from, and it's just great to see a place, being vibrant again, but as I said, being asked before, it was just different times in those, so it's, but to see it the way it is now is fantastic,
I don't think we've ever asked you this question, but how did you get into whiskey in the first place and working in the distilleries? Growing up on Islay, I imagine it's sort of in your blood, right?
Yeah, well, in a way, really. I was my father and my grandfather worked at distilleries here. When I was growing up, a youngster, and I didn't plan to go into it. I was sort of I left school and did a job for a couple of years. I was doing some peat cutting and working in a mill, and I was thinking of going away off the island for a little while. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, but I thought about maybe going off the island and maybe looking at the Navy or the police or something like that. And then one of the brewers who was at Lefroy at the time sort of tapped on my door one night and said, looking for somebody to come on work. I was sort of going away in a little motorbike to the middle of the island every morning, and it went for there. So I said, okay, yeah, it's fine, but I don't know if I'm going to stay for long, and then, 40 odd years later, we were still there. So that's really how it happened by accident. And I was lucky to get a chance. I mean, I was doing all the different jobs at the distillery then, from basically in peak having to do a bit of the malting, warehousing, shift work, production process. And then I got the chance to become the brewer at Lefroy, and that's where it all started off from there, So I did that for 10 years, then over to Jura for 8, and then I was at Ardbeg for the last 13. So,
when you think about this, back when you started out, Islay, the malts were highly regarded, but it wasn't the Valhalla of whiskey that it is today. That bucket list trip everybody makes to visit the island. Did you ever think your distilleries would become tourist attractions?
If you go back at that time, no. I mean, when I started, I'm looking at late 1970s, it was a different style. We saw maybe people would come into the distillery, but maybe be trade or something from that. But for somebody to come to the distillery and want to look round and, you can see how their favourite whiskey is being made, that wasn't there then. So to see it now, it's changed hugely. When I first started, I didn't think then, but as you see it grow and you see it develop over the last 30 or 40 years, you can, it's been great for obviously for all the distilleries, but for the island as well. Yeah.
One of the trends that really you've been part of, back when you got started, a lot of the distillery managers came in from off the island. But in recent years, between you, John Campbell, Georgie Crawford, Jim McEwen, it's really become a trend, or at least a good trend, really, to have native Iliocs running the distilleries on the island. Is that something that you take pride in?
Yeah, I think so. It's good to see. There's the local lads who are here. It's nice to see everyone doing well and on it. So I was quite. To be honest, I didn't expect to do it. From for my sort of path was a bit more of a meander. It wasn't sort of planned, if you like. But just to get that and get the chance to somebody to think that you can do that job for them is, I take quite I'm quite happy with over the last sort of few years the way it went. Hopefully, everyone thinks the same way. But I didn't think I'd be doing what I did for the last sort of 20 years of my my whiskey life. But yeah, it's been great. It's been a great experience. I was lucky to get the chance, and there's other lads on the island just now doing a great job as well. So. It's I'm sure they're enjoying it too.
How has the role of distillery manager changed over the years? Because back in the day, the managers were really sort of the mayors in the area around the distillery, and you were known around the distillery, but you weren't the sort of global figure that the managers are today in terms of being brand ambassadors.
Brand ambassador, yeah. We did a little bit of travelling on it. I didn't get as much maybe as some other didn't do as much rather. And I think it was, I was sort of mainly concentrating on the distillery. We've done a lot over the years. There was a lot of investment put into the distillery and developing, and obviously with an increase in production, with the popularity, the brand growing, and so there's a lot of things to do at the distillery. So plus the fact that being there, I did a lot when people came to the distillery as well, where, when we're looking after folks, maybe doing tours and tasting and making people and just looking after them there. So there was a lot to that side of it as well, as well as production, looking at health and safety and looking at projects, what we needed to do for the next number of years along with the team as well, So there was a lot of other work goes on, just beside the scene, as well as making the general day-to-day production side. So there's a lot involved in it, but it was enjoyable, yeah.
Where was the most unusual place you ever saw a bottle of whiskey that you made?
I don't know. It's hard to say unusual because I've been lucky to travel to different countries. But I think if you go to, I've been lucky enough to be in the States and many of the cities there, and Japan. I've been in before I went to Ardbeg. I was in Russia. I've been in all over Europe. Taiwan. So I think just actually going into, if you go into different places and you just see a bottle sitting on a shelf and you're thinking, we're maybe thousands of miles away from a little island on the west coast, and you see this bottle sitting on the shelf and people love it and enjoy drinking it and you're doing it. So I mean, and some people, if you went in and said, well, if somebody went and said, "Oh, this is the man that makes Ardbeg," you're sitting at a bar, and somebody that everyone wants to come and talk to you and just see how it is. So it's I wouldn't say unusual. It's just nice to go and see that in different countries right across the globe, you've got something that comes from a little place like this.
Now, while you're officially retired as distillery manager, you're still the chairman of the Ardbeg committee. Tell me about that and the role you're going to have at least for the next couple of years before you turn that over to Colin as well.
Just a little bit. For me, it's just, I think it was asked just to stay on as that. I think we've been doing it for a while, and I've been doing that. There's a lot of things come out in a year, and I was just asked to stay on a little bit to do that. So for me, it's not sort of onerous. It's it's something quite nice. I want to do it. It's for the company to decide when when to hand it over to Colin or for the next time. So I'll just keep going and sort of enjoying it. And if they want me to help out, yeah, that's fair enough. So we'll see what happens over the next little while. But at the moment, it's nice to see that. I've seen the emails sort of come out with that a little bit on it, the messages going out, and so it's just there's still there's a wee bit of a connection there, but not too much.
Do you still go over to the distillery for lunch or anything at the cafe and hang out over there every once in a while? We
don't just now because we're in, obviously here with COVID and everything. I mean, the cafe's not open at the moment. And I don't go into the distillery often. We know we can still go out locally and outside and speak with folks, but I don't go in at the moment. Once everyone, hopefully within the next few months, we'll be able to get back to some sort of normality and then go up and do. But I don't go in too often. I've been back a couple of times, but don't go in too often at the moment. So I just tend to out and about and maybe the odd person outside. So but we're a wee bit restricted in what we can do at the moment.
And obviously the loss of the festival again this year has got to be a blow for everybody on the island.
Yeah, I think so. The decision was made there to people who weren't sort of hanging on. It's hard to know when everything, when we will get. We just hopefully, within, hopefully later this year or something. It's just one of these things that we just don't know when we're able to get back to normal. But hopefully soon.
Last question: what will be your fondest memory of Ardbeg?
Fondest memory. I think if you're looking work-wise, I think now seeing the expansion in the new still house, it's not not working yet. I think it will be probably hopefully later this year. And seeing all that, being involved in a lot of that, and within the plant's been a real big memory. And I think I've got fond memories of just being out with the team. We used to go out on a sort of an annual day out. We'd shut the place down and we'd maybe go and do something. And we did some great trips, out together and we had some good laughs out and about. Whether we went over to Jura, we had ribs, we went over to Ireland for a day, we did lots of different things. So there's various different things and for that. Seen the highlights for these. Some of the trips I've been on, I mean, I've been lucky enough to go to America and different countries as well, and I've enjoyed visiting some of the cities there as well, like New York and Chicago, San Francisco, these, so I've been lucky for that way, and I've enjoyed seeing these places, which I never thought I would ever do.
Thanks to Mickey Heads for joining us this week on WhiskyCast. Ardbeg is primarily for members of the Ardbeg Committee outside the U.S., but is available at select retailers in the U.S. because the distillery can't sell directly to U.S. residents. The recommended retail price, $130 a bottle. By the way, last November I reported that Ardbeg was releasing a new 25-year-old single malt. It has now arrived in the U.S. with a recommended retail price of $900 a bottle. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by the Distillers Edition collection lineup of single malts from Diageo's Classic Malts. Look for the new 2020 editions of Oban, Talisker, Lagavulin, Cragganmore, Dalwhinnie, and Glenkinchie at a whiskey shop near you. Get all the details at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. And let's start off with Ardbeg. It's bottled at 51.4% ABV. The nose has a hint of rye bagels, cooked bananas, dried fruits, and a touch of peat smoke. The taste has a nice peaty smokiness balanced by baking spices, a hint of caramel candy, grilled fruits, and a touch of anise. The finish is nice and long with a soft smokiness. I'm scoring Ardbeg a 92. Meanwhile, the new Bowmore 30-year-old annual release that was unveiled last fall in the UK is now available in the US. I received a sample this week. It's bottled at 45.3% ABV. The nose is sweet and fruity, with notes of honey, peaches, a hint of red apples, grilled pineapple, butterscotch, and just a kiss of peat smoke. The taste? Wow! A spicy touch of white pepper comes on slowly behind fruity notes of pineapple and mango, while a touch of peat lingers in the background, along with a subtle hint of eucalyptus throat lozenges. The finish is long and gentle, with touches of tree fruits and a kiss of smoke. I'm scoring the Bowmore 30-year-old a 94. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. Want to find out just how Sagamore Spirit is reviving the tradition of Maryland-style rye whiskey? In-person tastings are available once again at the distillery in Baltimore, but you'll also find a variety of virtual tours, tastings, and other experiences at the Sagamore Spirit website. They're offering WhiskyCast listeners a free virtual guided tasting. Purchase a bottle from your local retailer, and a Sagamore Spirit teammate will guide you through each product. Visit SagamoreSpirit.com and use the code WhiskyCast, all one word, to access the tastings. Please drink responsibly. Compass Box's original Magic Cask blend came out in 2006 for the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. Now, John Glazer and his team have revived the Magic Cask name for their newest Speyside blended malt. It's bottled at 46% ABV. The nose has notes of red apples and peaches, along with honey, dried flowers, vanilla, and just a touch of chocolate. The taste is fruity and vibrant, with a nice touch of allspice underneath the fruity notes, balanced by hints of honey and dark chocolate. The finish is long, well-balanced, and complex. I'm scoring the new Compass Box Magic Cask a 93. And finally, I mentioned this one on the Happy Hour webcast a couple of weeks ago when Widow Jane's Lisa Wicker was one of my guests. The Vaults is a 15-year-old blend of straight bourbons from Indiana and Tennessee, finished in casks made from oak that was air-dried for 5 full years before coopering. It's bottled at 49.5% ABV. The nose has notes of black cherries, coffee beans, oak tannins, vanilla, and honey. The taste starts off with a touch of cherry cola, followed by a burst of oak and subtle spices, along with vanilla, honey, and a hint of cocoa. The finish is long with a touch of tree fruits. I'm scoring Widow Jane's The Vaults a 93. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of nearly 3,100 different whiskeys from all over the world. You'll find it at whiskycast.com. Check it out this week.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast. People never forget the person who introduced them to Redbreast. And then those people go on to introduce others to Redbreast. And soon the flock has grown exponentially. It's like a pyramid scheme. Without any of the bad stuff, of course. Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
It's time to announce our Whiskey Club of the Month for February, and this month we have something rare. Most of the time, club members contact us to nominate their own club, but this time around, our winning club was nominated by a non-member, who even asked if it was okay to nominate a different club first. Our friend Tyrone Cote emailed from Halifax, Nova Scotia, to nominate Club 101 from Hudson, Quebec, just outside of Montreal. Here's what he said about the club. The 101 Club embodies all that a good whiskey club aims to do by continuing to strive for ways to bring innovative experiences to its members and guests. Now, the club was founded back in 2013. The name comes from Ian Buxton's book, 101 Whiskies to Try Before You Die. The idea was that the members would work their way through the whiskies in the book. They've since gone on to host whiskey dinners, trips to Scotland, and during the pandemic, they've been hosting weekly Zoom calls for whiskey lovers all over Canada. Tyrone, thank you for nominating Club 101. We'll be sending them 24 WhiskyCast Glencairn glasses to use at their club tastings. Now, if you're in a whiskey club or know of a club that should be honored as our Club of the Month, all you have to do is use the contact form at whiskycast.com. Tell us a bit about your club and what makes it unique. If it has a website or a social media presence, we'll be glad to add a link on our Whiskey Clubs page at the website. And if you've already nominated a club, don't worry. We do carry over nominations from month to month. Who knows, you could win your club 24 WhiskyCast Glencairn glasses to use at club tastings. Thanks to Glencairn Crystal for helping us support whiskey clubs around the world. Let's open up the inbox now for your voice. John Quinn of Tullamore Dew was my guest on the Happy Hour webcast Friday night. Jennifer Wren, who works with the Dalmore and Jura whiskies in the USA, posted this comment on Instagram after the show. I'm quoting now, "John Quinn is a goddamn national treasure. I've never had more fun than hanging with him in a whiskey snug." I can't argue with that. During the webcast, @Bunkeye H asked whether Tullamore Dew might consider doing a Solera-style whiskey, given that it's owned by William Grant & Sons, which of course does just that with some of its whiskey at Glenfiddich. John didn't rule it out in the future, and Bunkeye tweeted this after the show. "Enjoyed the interview with John Quinn. Hope I didn't put him on the spot too much with the Solera VAT question. Always thought Glenfiddich 15 was a great buy for the quality and flavor. I had a nightcap of Tullamore rum cask, which, to use John's words, was very smooth. Cheers." Thanks for watching and for asking the question. Finally, on a personal note, I'd like to thank everyone who sent along their congratulations this week. During the news, I mentioned Whiskey Magazine's Hall of Fame inductees and touched on the Icons of Whiskey regional winners announced this week. There were too many winners to mention among all of the regions, but it was a very nice surprise to be named as Communicator of the Year in the U.S. region. And thanks to whomever it was who nominated me, along with everyone who voted online. The regional winners will go on to a final round for the Global Icons of Whiskey Awards to be announced next month. I'll run down the winners then. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always get in touch with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at WhiskyCast. My email address, comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and all the other things that make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. During my conversation with John Quinn on the webcast Friday night, one of the oldest questions in whiskey came up. Okay, I brought it up just to have some fun. Who invented whiskey, the Irish or the Scots? And here is how John answered it.
There is a general acceptance that the whiskies, the Ishkabaha distillation idea moved across from the Middle East. We would say it came with Christianity, with the monks moving in. They moved into Ireland, they brought Christianity, and they brought that secret of distillation and the old Irish pishogue, pishogue, what's a pishogue? It's an old Irish story, right? It's an Irish word for an old Irish legend. The old Irish pishogue says, and the Irish soon found a better use for it, of course, than the flora and the herbal essences, etc. So we made whiskey, and then it was taken to Scotland. What I can tell you is that if you ever read Charlie McLean's books, or if you ever look at Charlie McLean's video on YouTube, where he stands at the cross in Kilcoman, and he talks about Fergus MacVeigh, a medical man, Fergus Beaton. It's a wonderful evocation of how a Scotch whisky historian will tell you that it came from Ireland. And I will quote Charlie McLean long after I'm dead, because he is the quintessential, you know him, he's a quintessential historian of Scotch whisky. He's a reference book for everybody. And he says, this is where it started. And it was Fergus MacVeigh or Fergus Beaton who brought it from Ireland in the first place.
When it comes to Scotch whisky history, I'll defer to Charlie McLean's expertise any day of the week. If there is something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, a rare style of Irish whiskey with a creative twist. A unique triple-distilled blend of single pot still and single malt premium Irish whiskies. Writer's Tears Copper Pot. Do you dare to be creative?
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of all of our past episodes, going all the way back to 2005. We love to hear from you. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address, comments at whiskycast.com.
At Dewar's, we love a good story, and that's why we're always writing new chapters. Like our Caribbean Smooth whiskey finished in rum casks, or Ilegal Smooth finished in mezcal casks. As a 174-year-old brand, we could rest on our laurels. Instead, we'd much rather continue writing. Because when you keep telling the same old story, that's when people stop listening.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
You know, people always ask me, does Redbreast go better with ice or without? Would it go well with figs, dark chocolate, apple crumble? Is there one particular thing I should enjoy it with? I tell them, yeah, other people.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2021, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening, and please stay safe.